What if everything you've been through, the pain, the tears, the endless struggle, wasn't a weight on your shoulders, but the very thing that made you stronger? Clara had spent years running from her hardships, but one moment changed everything. One moment when she realized that the very struggles she tried to escape were the source of her greatest strength. This is the story of how Clara stopped surviving and started living. Comment where in the world you are watching from, and make sure to subscribe, like, and share, because tomorrow's story is one you don't want to miss. Clara's life had always felt like a balancing act, struggling to keep everything in motion without ever letting anything fall. She grew up in a small, cramped apartment with her younger brother, James, who had special needs. Their mother had raised them alone, juggling 2 jobs just to keep the roof over their heads. From an early age, Clara learned that survival meant pushing through no matter the cost. Now at 26, Clara found herself in a cycle she couldn't escape. Every day, she went to work in an office job she hated, managing an overwhelming workload. Every evening, she returned home to care for James, making sure he had dinner, helped with his homework, and settled him for bed. Clara had no time for herself, no time to think, to breathe, or to dream. Her friends had long since faded out of her life. Those rare moments when they invited her to hang out had become distant memories. Clara was always too busy, too exhausted to even consider saying yes. And so, she lived her life in a blur of duty and obligation, feeling like she was drowning in the weight of it all. Each morning, she woke up to a pile of demands, at work, at home, and inside her own heart. She would get up, do her best to power through, and return to her lonely bed at night, exhausted beyond belief. There was no time for anything else. No time for herself. No time for dreams. Only the relentless grind. She'd heard people say, "You're strong. You're handling everything so well." But Clara didn't feel strong. She felt tired, depleted, and on the edge of breaking down. The fatigue was endless. And deep inside, she longed for a life where she could catch her breath, just for a moment. But Clara had no idea that the moment she would discover her strength was just around the corner. It started on a regular Tuesday. Clara woke up late, as usual, and rushed through her morning routine. She skipped breakfast, barely remembered to comb her hair, and took the bus to work. The entire morning was a blur of chaos, and by the time she arrived at her office, she was already exhausted. Her boss, Karen, had been unusually cold toward her. She couldn't put her finger on it, but something felt off. Every task she was assigned was either scrutinized or delayed. The tension in the office grew thicker, and Clara found herself buried under an ever-growing mountain of responsibilities. Later that afternoon, she received an email from her mother's doctor. There had been an issue with the new medication her mother had been prescribed, and the hospital was requesting a meeting. Clara felt her chest tighten. She couldn't afford another problem. She didn't have the time. Her mother's health was already something she managed daily, but now this, another thing on her plate. Her mind raced. What else could she do? She was running on empty, trying to do everything for everyone, but there was no room left for her. And then, the inevitable happened. She had a breakdown in front of her team at work. She had been asked to fix a mistake that wasn't even hers to begin with. But her patience had worn thin. She snapped. "I'm doing my best, but it's never enough. No one sees how hard I work. No one knows what I'm going through," she shouted. Her colleagues stared at her, stunned into silence. The weight of her words hung heavy in the air. As Clara stood there, tears welled up in her eyes. She had never spoken her pain out loud before. Not like this. She felt embarrassed, vulnerable, exposed. But she also felt a strange relief. For the first time in a long while, she wasn't pretending to be strong. She was just real. But the guilt soon followed. She had let it all out, let the cracks show. How could she have let herself go like that? How could she have allowed herself to be seen as weak? She left work early, running home to avoid anyone noticing her. When she walked through the door, James was sitting at the table, waiting for her. He looked up at her with those innocent eyes, asking her where his dinner was. Clara smiled weakly, trying to push the emotional storm inside her away. But that night, she couldn't sleep. Her mind raced, and she realized something. She had been ignoring the one thing she needed most herself. She was so caught up in trying to fix everyone else's problems, trying to meet everyone's expectations, that she had completely forgotten about her own needs. Her entire life had been about doing what was expected. She had been running on empty, always putting others before herself, always thinking her struggles were just something to survive. But maybe, just maybe, she had it all wrong. The next morning, Clara decided she couldn't go on like this. She couldn't keep pretending everything was fine. She couldn't keep pushing herself to the brink for a life that felt like it was slipping through her fingers. It was time for a change. She called in sick to work and decided to spend the day with herself. It wasn't easy at first. The guilt gnawed at her. She felt selfish. But slowly, as the day unfolded, Clara began to let go of the weight she had been carrying for years. She went for a walk in the park, something she hadn't done in months. She felt the cool breeze on her face and let the sunshine warm her skin. She breathed deeply, taking in the air, feeling it fill her lungs for the first time in what felt like forever. Clara realized something during that walk. She had been fighting her battles alone, believing that her struggles were something to endure. But in reality, her struggles were the key to her strength. Every challenge she had faced, every sacrifice she had made, had built her into the woman she was today. She wasn't weak. She wasn't broken. She was stronger than she had ever known. That night, when Clara returned home, she sat with James, as she always did. But this time, she didn't feel burdened. She felt empowered. She realized that she had been given the gift of resilience. Her struggles had taught her how to survive. Yes, but more than that, they had taught her how to thrive. She wasn't going to just survive anymore. She was going to live. And in that moment, Clara made a promise to herself. She would no longer put everyone else's needs before her own. She would take care of herself, too. The next morning, Clara woke up with a new sense of purpose. She wasn't just Clara, the woman who had to manage it all. She was Clara, a woman who could take control of her life, who could acknowledge her pain and turn it into something powerful. She was going to follow her dreams, even if they seemed impossible, and she was going to ask for help when she needed it. Months passed, and Clara began to build a life she never thought possible. She started taking time for herself, taking weekends off, pursuing hobbies she had long forgotten about, and reconnecting with the friends she had pushed away. She finally gave herself permission to be happy, to chase her dreams. Clara also made changes at work. She no longer allowed herself to be walked over. She set boundaries and began to ask for what she needed. And surprisingly, people respected her more for it. She became a better sister to James, a better friend, and a stronger, more fulfilled woman. But the most important change Clara made was learning to love herself. Not for what she could do for others, but simply for who she was. She realized that her struggles didn't define her. They were just part of her story. And now, Clara was ready to write the next chapter. When she stood in front of a room full of women at a community event, sharing her story, she realized how far she had come. She spoke with a sense of pride and strength, no longer hiding behind her struggles, but embracing them as a part of her power. As she finished her speech, Clara looked out at the faces of those in the audience. And for the first time in years, she didn't feel alone. She felt strong, empowered, and ready to face whatever came next. Clara had finally realized that her struggles were not her burden. They were her strength.